Hello MotoGP fans, welcome back to ZNGP Today. Marc Marquez's victory at the Australian Grand Prix was nothing short of remarkable. However, the race was far from smooth for the Gresini Ducati rider. A tear-off from his helmet disrupted the start, but despite the mishap, Marquez managed to fight his way to victory. Marquez's technical boss, Frankie Carchedi, who reflects on the challenges and triumphs of the race. Enea Bastianini had high hopes going into Sunday's race at Phillip Island after a strong sprint race and promising practice sessions. However, the Ducati Lenovo rider struggled to keep pace with the front-runners, including Marc Marquez, ultimately finishing in 5th place. This reports on Bastianini's frustration and his thoughts on the challenging race day. Marco Bezzecchi faced a tough weekend at the Australian MotoGP, especially after a massive crash with Maverick Vinales during Saturday's sprint race. Bezzecchi, who was later hit with a long lap penalty, shared his perspective on the incident and expressed disappointment with Vinales' post-crash behavior. Don't forget to click subscribe button and the bell icon for MotoGP news update. Marc Marquez's victory at Phillip Island didn't follow the script that he and his team had carefully planned. A tear-off from his helmet caused immediate trouble at the start, forcing Marquez into a dangerous situation early in the race. His technical boss, Frankie Carchedi, admitted to TNT Sports that the incident disrupted their strategy from the very beginning. "You know, we spent hours talking about the plan and it just went completely wrong from the start? I mean, it's like you can't write the script. Nothing just goes as normal. It's like improvised." Quote from Carchedi. Despite the chaos caused by the tear-off, Marquez managed to recover and stay within the leading group, battling against Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia throughout the race. Marquez's starting position from the front row made the tear-off incident even more dangerous, but his remarkable ability to recover showcased his incredible skill. Carchedi explained that it's rare to see such a comeback, especially from the front row in MotoGP. "I just heard Marc say, in this era, you have to be at the front to have a chance. So it was a very strange race to be able to come back and still have a fight for the win. You don't see that very often." Despite the early scare, Marquez stayed focused, executing a race-long battle with his rivals while managing to stay competitive in the difficult conditions. The tear-off that caused the initial scare was a focal point in Carchedi's post-race reflections. He joked about the potential danger it could have caused to others on the track, emphasizing how unpredictable the race became because of it. "This is another tear-off we found," he joked, holding up the plastic visor protection. "We were thinking about all the people who could have gone under it. He went under his own wheel. I mean, he couldn't go under it," Carchedi told by Motosan. The tear-off incident was a stark reminder of how even the smallest details can disrupt an entire race strategy in MotoGP. One of the key takeaways from the race was how Marquez adapted his riding style, especially in the final laps. Carchedi highlighted how Marquez changed his approach to the corners, particularly in Turn 3, which gave him the edge he needed to secure the win. "The plan was to go behind, especially after Saturday, behind Jorge, to save the tires as much as possible and then try at the end. So I think the first lap made a big difference. Simply because as soon as he got behind Pecco, he was able to stay clearly in Turn 3. We could see that he was riding in a different way to the whole weekend," Carchedi concluded. Marquez's ability to adapt his riding style in the closing stages of the race allowed him to maintain his pace and ultimately claim victory. Marc Marquez's victory at the Australian Grand Prix may have come with its challenges, but his resilience and ability to adapt in the face of adversity were key to his success. With his technical team behind him, Marquez continues to prove why he remains one of the most formidable riders in MotoGP. As the championship battle rages on, Marquez's performance at Phillip Island will undoubtedly be remembered as one of the season's highlights. Enea Bastianini entered Sunday's race with confidence, expecting a better outcome after his sprint race performance and Sunday morning practice. However, the Italian rider was left frustrated by his inability to compete at the level he anticipated. "I am frustrated that I was not as competitive, especially because after the sprint race and Sunday morning I was convinced that I was going to have a great race and a different start." Quote from Bastianini. Throughout the race, Bastianini struggled with front-end issues on his Ducati, which forced him to take a more conservative approach. Bastianini explained that the front end of his Ducati was behaving strangely, making it difficult for him to push as hard as he wanted. As a result, he focused on staying safe and avoiding a crash, rather than chasing the front runners. "Unfortunately, the front end was behaving strangely, and every time I was in the middle of the corner I lost the line, so I limited myself to trying not to fall, preferring not to take too many risks. I was hoping that something would change at the end, but it didn't happen." Despite these issues, Bastianini managed to finish fifth, just behind his teammate, Pecco Bagnaia, though he was not satisfied with the result. In the final laps of the race, Bastianini decided to push harder, attempting to stay in the group and secure as many points as possible. However, he remained dissatisfied with his performance, feeling that he couldn't replicate the strong times he set earlier in the weekend. "Only in the last 2 laps did I push a little harder to stay in the group and bring home some points. I managed to finish fifth, but I can't be satisfied," Bastianini told by Crash. His inability to match the pace he showed on Friday and during practice left him frustrated, even though he finished in a respectable position. One of Bastianini's goals was to try to follow Marc Marquez, but he quickly realized that it was an impossible task given the pace of Marquez and other top riders. Bastianini also commented on the constant battles between Ducati riders, who regularly find themselves competing against each other at the front. "Was there a fight? Even among Ducati riders you always try to fight, because there are many in the first positions. Today I wanted to try to follow and chase Marquez, but it was impossible." Bastianini praised Marc Marquez's aggressive style, acknowledging that he wasn't in a position to challenge the Spaniard or replicate similar moves during the race. Bastianini expressed admiration for Marquez's overtaking maneuver on Jorge Martin, comparing it to his own style. However, Bastianini admitted that he wasn't comfortable enough on the bike to make such moves himself on race day. "Was Marc's overtaking of Martin similar to mine? It was nice and difficult. It was my style, but I wouldn't have been able to do it today. I didn't feel comfortable and I was never able to repeat the times I did on Friday and this morning," Bastianini concluded. Enea Bastianini leaves Phillip Island with mixed emotions after a weekend that started with promise but ended in frustration. As he looks ahead to the next rounds in Thailand and Malaysia, Bastianini will be eager to put this race behind him and return to the podium. On the penultimate lap of the Australian MotoGP sprint, Marco Bezzecchi collided with Maverick Vinales, leading to a massive crash. After medical checks in Melbourne, Bezzecchi returned to Phillip Island to face the FIM stewards, who handed him a long lap penalty. The stewards determined that Bezzecchi was primarily responsible for the collision, but acknowledged the mitigating factor of turbulent air from Vinales' bike. Taking the above facts into consideration, the stewards determined that the balance of responsibility for the collision and resulting crash rests clearly with number 72. However, the effects of turbulent air caused by the pass of number 12 may in this situation offer a degree of mitigation. Quote from the stewards. The penalty meant that Bezzecchi, who qualified 4th, dropped to 7th during Sunday's race after serving the penalty, and a later fall relegated him to the back of the grid. Reflecting on the crash, Bezzecchi explained that Vinales' slipstream and turbulent air caused his bike to shift unexpectedly. According to Bezzecchi, Vinales' braking pattern also contributed to the incident, as he felt that Vinales braked earlier than usual after overtaking. "Maverick passed me in the straight with the slipstream, and turbulent air meant my bike went on the left. So I needed to lean the bike steering straight to bring me away from the outside curb. The problem is that as soon as I did this, he also put himself exactly in front of me and he braked earlier. Quote from Bezzecchi. Despite accepting the penalty, Bezzecchi was quick to note that similar incidents involving slipstream turbulence have happened before without major consequences, citing examples from previous seasons. One aspect of the aftermath that particularly upset Bezzecchi was Vinales' reaction immediately following the crash. Bezzecchi described how Vinales displayed anger while he lay in the gravel trap, giving him the middle finger. This behavior stood in stark contrast to their later conversation in the medical center, where Vinales appeared more calm and understanding. "I didn't like his behavior immediately after the crash. If it was the reverse, I would go to check how is the other rider instead of doing the middle finger and saying F***K to me many times after we crash at 300 km/h. Quote from Bezzecchi. Despite the tense exchange, Bezzecchi emphasized that the most important outcome was that both riders were unharmed after such a dangerous crash. After the crash, Bezzecchi was flown to Melbourne for further medical scans, particularly on his neck and head, as a precaution. He later returned to Phillip Island, where he underwent additional checks with MotoGP's medical team before racing on Sunday. Vinales, who also suffered pain in his arm and back, managed to finish 8th in the Grand Prix despite the injuries. He expressed relief at being able to compete in the next race in Thailand and refrained from commenting on the penalty imposed on Bezzecchi. "I don't have nothing to say about the long lap decision for Bezzecchi, because, at the end, the stewards need to decide what penalty to give or not." Quote from Vinales. The tension between Marco Bezzecchi and Maverick Vinales added an extra layer of drama to a race weekend already filled with challenges. Both riders will now look ahead to Thailand, where they will have a chance to regroup and continue their fight in the MotoGP Championship. Thanks for watching ZNGP Today, and this is your MotoGP news update. See you in the next video.